Hello, folks, and welcome back to the Culture Books podcast. This is episode 13 of Use of Weapons. We are covering chapter VIII. So the great countdown to what actually started this book is on. In a very unusual chapter structure. Obviously, this is a read-along podcast, so you need to buy a copy of Ian M. Banks' Use of Weapons and start at chapter prelude. Yes, but assuming you've done all of that and you're with us, my name is John. Hello, and I'm joined by
Sheridan.
And I would like to wish everyone a happy new year, and we hope you had a tolerable Christmas.
Or whatever holiday you're celebrating.
Sheridan loves Christmas. Yes, and but I'm the only one who'll tell you. Okay, Sheridan, what do we do right now in the podcast?
So now you have 30 seconds to recap the book so far.
Okay, you want to count me in?
3, 2, 1.
So we are following two storylines, one going backwards, one going forwards. The one going forwards, agents of the culture are racing across the galaxy to try and prevent a war in a star cluster, which is hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of stars. And in the other timeline, we are going backwards to explore the dark past of Sheridan Zakalwe, who is one of the agents of the culture travelling across the galaxy to try and stop the war. And I think that's it.
Good job.
Hang on a sec. Okay, so now Sheridan is going to try and recap this chapter in 30 seconds. Are you ready, Sheridan?
Yes.
Okay, your time starts in 3, 2, 1.
Zakalwe's fighting some sort of unknown war that's in a very tense, or battle maybe, tense moment, rained out. He's taken someone hostage. She's like, I guess, unhappy because she's a hostage. There's a lot of references to the chair. There's lots of chair discussions. And then he basically leaves that battle and goes home.
Okay. Yes, there's a battle, and it really is part of a war, I would say. But, you covered that, so that's good. What did you think of the opening of this chapter?
There was a lot of discussion of mud.
Yeah, lots of discussion of mud. Armies hate mud. He really explored that heavily in this one.
But even in the future, they still hate them. You'd think they would have got around that.
Well, this isn't really in the future. This planet's definitely in a Earth-equivalent tech kind of place. There's helicopters and cars. And
there was reference to tanks, yes.
Yeah, and hydroelectric dams and quite close to us. In fact, this war could be modern-day Ukraine. Yeah. So it's that kind of thing. Could also, there's helicopters, so it's a bit past World War II. But yes, so, and I did like the setting as well, that obviously there's been a bigger civilization here in the past, and they're sort of picking their way through the wreckage, the ruined machines of yesteryear and the giant concrete slab, and then someone sticking a mud brick cottage on top of this concrete slab. Oh, that was kind of cool. Okay.
It sounds very dirty in there, though.
It's definitely a very decrepit, abandoned hut. Semi-abandoned. It feels like someone might be coming back at some point.
I feel like he might get a disease if he stays there much longer.
He gets those all the time. Okay, and then it's got this line of he went into the cottage, and then it's really jarring how it jumps into this. The assassin flinched as he threw open the door. The chair she was tied to, a small wooden thing, was balanced precariously against a thick set of drawers, and when she jerked, its legs rasped on the stone floor and sent chair and girl sliding to the ground with a whack. She hit her head on the flagstones and cried out. What did you make of that introduction to the girl?
Well, I was a bit confused about whether the assassin was him.
Yes.
Or her.
Yes, it was definitely a confused scene. Yes. And then it sort of unravels very gently that she was in the middle of cutting her hand bindings when he opened the door.
Yes.
Yeah, which I thought was a nice touch of assembling the scene in sort of a backwards way, which obviously is a theme of this book as well.
But it also, like, he knows the whole time that she's faking it and that she's not really passed out, and he knows she's trying to Soro binds off and all that kind of stuff. It's kind of like showing that he's way more experienced at all this than most normal humanoids.
Yeah. Yeah, he's definitely... I mean, that's the whole point of him. He's been around the block a lot of times. But in this chapter, it does come out a bit that he's lost local context because of that, in that he's sort of the ultimate war tourist. And I did like the stuff about his sore nose because she'd headbutted him in the face, which I think Zakalwe with a nearly broken nose is going to be a bit of a recurring theme from here on.
Why?
He keeps getting in fights and,
Are you giving me a spoiler?
Not really. You might have noticed that this Zakalwe chap seems to keep being involved in conflict.
True.
Yes. Any other highlights of this bit of the book for you, or the chapter for you?
What, her being cross-eyed?
We'll get to the cross-eyed stuff, but I found that very amusing. I don't know if you did.
Yeah, it was funny.
So then talking about her pretending, he looked at the woman. She was pretending to come around. He wished he had the strength and the inclination to go over and hit her, but he was too tired and too conscious that he would be taking out on her the defeat of an entire army. Belting any one individual, let alone a helpless, cross-eyed woman, would be so pathetically petty a way of trying to find recompense for a downfall of that magnitude that even if he did live, he would be ashamed forever that he had done such a thing. Again, I like this piece of storytelling that you start with like, okay, Zakalwe's, or is it even Zakalwe? At the start it's like someone's on an island. And then it's like, okay, it's Zakalwe on the island.
Well, the only reason I sort of knew it was Zakalwe is he's in all the Roman numeral chapters, so it would be pretty weird.
Yeah.
If he wasn't.
Yeah. And then we get the sense that, okay, there's some sort of war going on, but we don't really know what it's about. And then, okay, this woman tried to kill him. And then, okay, something horrible's happening to his army. There is also a lovely description of having had his hands in the floodwater, because floodwater is just so filthy. And I thought that was well drawn. So, even rubbing his eyes with his hands, suddenly he's getting filth into his eyes because it's all over his hands. And it's a very sticky sort of grit. And I thought that was covered well. Yeah, it just doesn't come off. Okay. So what did you think about him thinking about, he wished he had the strength to go over and hit her?
Well, I mean, he's annoyed. I mean, he's not really going to do it. That's the whole point of that paragraph.
Sure. Okay.
But he's, so frustrated that he thinks about doing it. I mean, people think about doing things all day that they're not going to do.
Okay. That's interesting. That's where you draw the line. Okay. Nice one. It's very tolerant of you.
I mean, I've got plans of my own against neighbours, co-workers, all sorts of people. Never do them.
Okay. All right. And then we get a little bit of description of exactly how they'd come to be in each other's company, with her wandering into his staff car. He's driving around generaling and gets detached from his convoy, and then suddenly this crazy woman kills his guard and his driver and tries to kill him. She has a red hot shot at it. I mean, she actually grazed his skull with the bullet. That's fractions of a millimeter from killing the dude. And then not only do I love this is one of those lines that's been so highlighted that it comes through in the Kindle that everyone's highlighted.
I've seen that. I think that's the same
where
one.
He's noting that what she did was kind of stupid, and then sometimes heroics revolted him. They seemed like an insult to the soldier who weighed the risks of the situation and made calm, cunning decisions based on experience and imagination. The sort of unshowy soldiering that didn't win medals, but wars.
Yeah, it's a good line.
Yeah. Although I would say that from the culture's point of view, Zakalwe is the flashy amateur who's does silly things.
Possibly,
But, obviously he's standing on a hill and they stand on a mountain and everyone looks down at this poor girl. And then we got some more description of how they'd come to be there. I've got to say, they both seemed incredibly lucky that they'd just been flung out of this car onto the concrete instead of just washed away with the car, which was much more likely. And also lucky that neither of them killed each other in this.
Well, that's it. Like, why doesn't he kill her? I He should have just killed her and moved on. Like,
Yeah, well, there is some discussion of who she reminds him of.
that's
later
true,
in the chapter.
yes. But I don't know if she's reminding her of him. Hang on, I've got that the wrong way around. I don't know if she's reminding him of that person at that moment, at the beginning. I think it's once he puts her in the chair, right?
Well, obviously, once he puts her in the chair, he's reminding her of someone that's associated with chairs. Yes, but I mean, the other thing is like he punches her on the chin and she's knocked out cold. That's a very Hollywood movie trope that doesn't actually exist in the real world.
Yeah, you probably either die or...
You're much more likely to permanently brain injure someone than to actually knock them cold with one punch.
Yeah, true.
And when people get knocked out in fights, it tends to be a bunch of exhaustion factors with a punch to the head as part of many punches to the head, tipping them over the edge. But although this woman might be quite exhausted, so I guess there is that. And then we get the dialogue between them, with her as the angry true believer and him being the bored, disassociated war tourist. Although I did like the interplay that it's becoming clear to him she has no idea that she's actually in the presence of someone really important.
Yeah, well, why would she?
Yeah.
She just thinks he's a soldier in that army.
Well, except she knew he was in a big staff car with his own driver.
Yeah, but even then, she still thinks he's just...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
why would she know the culture's sending someone
she wouldn't know, but he's been there for at least 2 years. That's been
and he's a
described.
general.
Yeah, so and he's a general who's being discussed in the media because that gets discussed later. So, you know, if in other circumstances she might have recognised him, but here she hasn't.
Yeah.
Yeah. But he doesn't know that one way or another, which is part of the unfolding drama. And then I love this stuff. You won't win. You can't win. We'll win. And then he's like, why did I tie the silly fool to a chair of all things? And then, you know, I just love the innuendo of him where he's like, oh, you could be right. Things are looking damp. Does that make you feel any better? And then she says, we are invincible. We'll never give up. And he's like, well, you've proved fairly vincible before. I thought that was a nice line. I want to use that sometime.
I like the bit where he says, or she says something like, you should die. And he was like, you've backtracked.
Yeah. You've retreated.
You've retreated.
I'm just going to read a section of this because it rings true of many times and places. We were betrayed, the woman shouted. Our armies never were defeated. We were stabbed in the back, I know. Yes, but our spirit will never die. We... Ah, shut up, he said, swinging his legs off the narrow bed and facing the woman. I've heard that shit before. We was robbed. The folks back home let us down. The media were against us. Shit, he ran a hand through his wet hair. Only the very young or the very stupid thinks wars are waged just by the military. As soon as news travels faster than a dispatch rider or a bird's leg, the whole nation, whatever, is fighting. That's your spirit, your will, not the grunt on the ground. If you lose, you lose. Don't whine about it. You'd have lost this time too if it hadn't been for this fucking rain. He held up a hand as the woman drew breath. And no, I don't believe God is on your side. Now, this is a narrative throughout our 20th century history. Germans after World War I all complained that, we weren't actually beaten in the field, even though their entire country had collapsed around, behind the armies in France. And then you've got Americans in Vietnam. Saying, Americans in Afghanistan. I've literally seen Americans just in the last week or two trying to say, the Afghans never actually, defeated us in a pitched battle. It's like, who cares? You ran away. You lost. Or even A Fish Called Wanda's got a beautiful description of that. The movie when Otto's saying, Americans are winners. And Jean-Claude's like, what about Vietnam?
It's been a long time since I've watched that movie.
Apparently it hasn't aged well.
Really?
People are slagging it off in places. I'm like, how could you speak ill of A Fish Called Wanda? Although, anytime you see Jamie Lee Curtis in lingerie is a good day, really, isn't it? Okay, and then there's more, I hope your children die slowly. And then I don't get this line. Do you get it? I'm not sure I qualify, but if I do, it'd be a long spit. Anyway, if one of the listeners can understand what that joke is, they can let us know in the comments.
Sorry, I was assuming you'd edit that long pause out.
I will edit that long pause out.
Is it got something to do with when she... I don't know. You know how she spits?
Mm.
But yeah, actually, now that you say that, when I read it, it was a little bit confusing to me too.
We can just leave it as a mystery there. I'm wondering if when she's talking about the children die slowly, he's thinking of them being roasted on a spit, and he's saying it'd have to be a really long spit. But that's the only...
that's what it means. I think that is what it means.
Mm. Yeah. The dialogue continues in beautiful ways. Our women are more manly than your men, the woman sneered. And still you breed. Choice must be limited, I suppose.
The whole dialogue between them, you can just tell he's just done this so many times before.
Zakalwe or...
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's...
He's like been in this situation so many times, over and over, all different races, all different cultures.
Mm.
Not meaning to be having a pun there, but he's just done it so many times.
Yep. And then I love this, and again, it's something that I would like to reuse sometime in the future, where she's like, your children suffer and die horribly. He's like, well, if that's really the way you feel, then there's nothing worse I can wish on you than to be exactly the fuckhead you so obviously are. And I think that's a great insight.
Yeah.
And then, she's throwing more stuff at him. It's like, oh, you'll run out of expletives soon. Save them for later. Not that keeping forces in reserve has ever been you guys' strong point, has it? And she doesn't really quite get where he's going. And, I personally really enjoyed the dialogue in this part.
Same.
Yeah. And, but then we get to... he's talking about how his fighting machine's dying out there in the rain. That's washing everything away. Then it mentions that he's been there for 2 years. But then, and why? Why had he tied her to a chair of all things? Did he try to make chance and fate redundant by scheming against himself? A chair, a girl tied to the chair, about the same age, maybe a little older, maybe the same slim figure, with a lying greatcoat that tried to pretend she was bigger but failed. About the same age, about the same shape.
So obviously this other chick has messed him up from a chair, right?
You could say that.
It has to be that.
Well, that's the association we've got there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. I guess we'll have to see what the book brings in the future.
He's obviously tied this other chick to a chair and she's got him. I don't think we're going into some weird BDSM moment with the other chick. Might be wrong about that. Who knows?
Who knows? And then the cross eyes we come to. He mentions that she's cross-eyed.
Which was a bit mean, I felt.
And he's all right, you haven't got cross eyes.
I like later when she's like, well, I haven't. It's just a slight defect. It didn't stop the army board from taking me.
And then to himself, he's like, yeah, but they're taking children and pensioners. Which does have a real feel of Ukraine today. Yes. And then I love the stuff where he's trying to blow her nose and she thinks he's trying to kill her. Because it's just the way it was written. There is something about someone...
putting a rag over your face.
Trying to help you when you've got a runny nose. And,
especially as an adult.
Well, he has tied it to the chair, so
yeah.
He's kind of responsible. And I love the way he introduced Rogtambar in the... at this early point in the chapter. It's a bit of a Chekhov's gun of a character. Where he's talking about all his junior officers are useless, and the thing that he regrets most about being stuck in this cabin is that he knows everyone's going to be screwing everything up. And and then, damn, the only other one he trusted was Rogtambar, and he was too junior to take charge. And then the line of having to take so much on himself that any absence, any hesitation, even any rest gave the clueless frothheads around him a chance to fuck things up even further. I think everyone who's worked in an organisation knows that feeling. The thing to remember is everyone around you thinks you're one of the clueless frothies.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, here we get the big line where he tries to go to sleep. And I'm just going to read this section. He saw a chair and a ship that was not a ship. He saw a man with two shadows. And he saw that which cannot be seen, a concept, the adaptive, self-seeking urge to survive, to bend everything that can be reached to that end, and to remove, and to add, and to smash, and to create, so that one particular collection of cells can go on, can move forwards and decide, and keep moving, keep deciding, knowing that if nothing else, at least it lives. And it had two shadows. It was two things. It was the need and it was the method. The need was obvious, to defeat what opposed its life. The method was that taking and bending of materials and people to one purpose, the outlook that everything could be used in the fight, that nothing could be excluded, that everything was a weapon, and the ability to handle those weapons, to find them and choose which one to aim and fire, that talent, that ability, that use of weapons. A chair and a ship that was not a ship, a man with two shadows, and now that's kind of, I mean, this is around the middle of the book, and that's the crux that it revolves around. And it's one of those things that as a young man, you're like, yeah, use the weapons. Anything can be a weapon. Yeah. And then as a grown up, you're like, oh, grow up.
Well, it wasn't not the first one, so I can't relate to that.
Okay. Surely you can relate to the will to succeed. We see people like this all around us in our lives.
I actually think that's, well, I mean, I'm not going to speak about it from a gendered thing, but...
Yeah. I don't think it's necessarily gendered. I've known women who get a little tunnel vision.
Yeah, but I have never wanted to use weapons.
Sure, but you use other things to achieve your goals.
Yeah.
Yeah. And certainly, I will say it's more men than women, but I have known women who, once they've decided that they're supporting a cause, believe that anything's justified in that support, and that's a dangerous way to think. But we'll get more to do with that.
I feel like it's one of those paragraphs that I mean, obviously, like, using the title of a book, you're like, oh, well, this means something.
Yeah.
But, like, it felt like I was like, well, I don't really get it because I don't have all of the information yet. So I feel like it means more to someone who's read the book before.
I can remember, and I think it's something I've almost never done. I think I actually highlighted in the paper copy of the book that I had 25 years ago. So it made a big impression on me at the time, but I was a very foolish young guy. So then finally the conversation between the two winds down when he says, well, I wasn't going to kill you, but keep on whining like this and I may change my mind. She says, I hate you. He says, and I hate you too. She starts crying, and then he looked out into the rain again and saw the Stabberend. How do they pronounce that in the audiobook?
I think like that.
Stabberend.
I actually mostly read this chapter than listened to it because, as you know, I accidentally listened to the wrong chapter.
Right.
So then today I just decided instead of going back to the audiobook, I'd just read it. But when I actually saw that, I did actually think, oh, I should probably remember how they say that in there.
Okay, now in the band Sabaton's video for their song Bismarck, there's a scene when the ghost of the Bismarck comes out of the fog, and that's exactly how I imagine this scene with the Stabberend looming at him out of the out of the rain. So if any of our listeners haven't listened or watched Sabaton's Bismarck video, then I strongly would recommend it. And this isn't really spoiler because Sheridan won't know what I'm talking about. I strongly believe the Stabberend was heavily influenced in Banks's mind by the Tirpitz, which was Bismarck's sister ship. So, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what you're talking about there.
Yeah, that's fine.
I mean, I know what the Bismarck is like a general concept.
What's the concept in your mind?
Is it a ship?
It is a ship. Yeah.
German?
Yes.
World War II?
Yep.
Good?
Ooh, that's a subject of considerable debate. I frequent certain forums where a mention of the Bismarck will get you instantly banned.
Why?
Why? Because everyone's just sick of arguing about it.
Right. I sort of want to know more now, but I won't
But anyway,
digress
Tirpitz is
this
the one of the...
podcast into something that you probably would be quite happy to go along with.
Sure. Okay, and then defeat. The rain whispered, tanks foundering in the mud, men giving up under the torrential rain, everything coming to bits. And then, do you know who I am? Do you know my rank? No. Should I? No. And then the discussion of the people he's been working for. It would have been their victory, but it would be his defeat. Standard complaint.
Anyone who's had a job.
Anyone who's had a boss.
Yeah, anyone who's had a boss knows that feeling.
He tried to tell himself that mostly he'd won. He knew he had. It was only the moment of defeat, the instance of paralysis that made him really think and try to join up the weave of his life into a whole. That was when his thoughts returned to the battleship Staber end and what it represented. That was when he thought about the chairmaker and the reverberating guilt behind that banal description.
Now, has the chairmaker been mentioned before?
Yes, I believe so.
I think I asked that same question last time.
Yeah. Certainly, the maker of the chair has been referred to. It might not. That might be the first. This might be the first time they've used that exact phrase. Yes. And I love this. He envied people who would be born, be raised, mature with those around them, have friends, and then settle down in one place with one set of acquaintances, live ordinary and unspectacular, unrisky lives, and grow old and be replaced, their children coming to see them, and die old and senile, content with all that had gone before. It gets to be kind of the dream at some point.
That's literally how most people live.
Yeah. And then the wishing to be a seabird. If I were a seabird, but how could you be a seabird? If you were a seabird with your brain, your brain would be tiny and stupid, and you would love half-rotted fish guts and tweaking the eyes out of little grazing animals. You would know no poetry, and you would never appreciate flying as fully as the human on the ground, yearning to be you.
There's a couple of points in this chapter where he goes off on random sort of thought bubbles that like most people do.
Yeah.
Thinking about hitting air and all that kind of thing.
I particularly like this one because so many people are like, oh, I'd like to be a bird. And then being like, you watching the bird can appreciate it more fully than the bird's capable of appreciating itself. And you could then make the argument that that's how the culture minds view him. And then Rogton Bar swishes in, twirls his cloak. What did you think of this fine chap's appearance, Sheridan?
Oh, I mean, I didn't really think much of it because, I mean, right, that like Zakalwe's been placed there by the culture to do some sort of job, and that this person is just going to be some sort of ancillary, meaningless character.
This is his only appearance in the book.
Yeah, this. You're like, oh,
but he's also the closest thing to a friend I think we see Zakalwe having.
Do you think?
Have you seen him have many friends?
I actually think he's sort of got a weird friendship with Scaffin.
Yeah, it's a real frenemy sort of thing. I mean, it's a friendly antagonism, I'd describe that as. Maybe even an amicable antagonism. But
you could be friends with people that you're lovers with. He's had closer relationships in the book.
He's had closer relationships, but lovers is different. Because that's all, there's a whole bunch of stuff tied in with that.
Great,
whereas I can't honestly, maybe.
But I mean, he knows it's fleeting. He knows he's not going to stay.
Yeah, but he likes this chap. He he enjoys this chap's company. They work well together. But that's the classic thing with workplace friendships as well, isn't it? In that,
that you're like, the person's so important to you in the context, but once you lose the context,
you might stay friends on Facebook,
you might catch up for drinks, or if you move cities, you'll go and meet them and have dinner or whatever, and it'll be really lovely. But I mean, that's the nature of friendship, though, right? Like
most friendships, yeah.
You can go through ebbs and flows depending on your context.
Yeah. Anyway, I like Rogton Bar. And then finally the explanation of everything that's been going on through the chapter that we don't know about.
He does have a good. Sorry, I will say he does have a good line. Maybe you're about to say it.
You tell me what you think the line is.
When he's talking about, I think they were so busy blaming you for losing their idiotic war that they didn't realise people connected them with it as well. Why to sleep as usual? Why to sleep as usual is a good phrase. Like, I want to use that.
Okay, all right. Well, I'm glad you got something from this. Funnily enough, the bit I highlighted immediately followed that. That's sort of almost a throwaway line. Oh, and that manic idea of yours, the commando squad placing sink charges on the Macklin Reservoir, it worked. Sent all that water into the dam and made the thing overflow. Didn't actually break, but it overtopped. Is that the expression? Anyway, an awful lot of water went down the valley and swept away most of the 5th Army's high command. Not to mention quite a bit of the 5th itself, judging from the bodies and tents seen floating past our lines over the last few hours. And there we all were, thinking you were crazy for dragging that hydrologist around with the general staff for the past week. And then saying, whatever, things must be serious. There's talk of peace, I'm afraid. So here we get one of Zakalwe's cunning plans being pulled off. Also committing a war crime by any measure. And in particular, when you think of, I'm trying to make the Ukraine comparison, remember the Russians blew up that huge dam on the Dnieper River last year, possibly hoping for a similar sort of effect. Yes, and then he's saying, have you been mud wrestling, General? Only with my conscience. Really? Who won? Well, it was one of those rare occasions when violence really doesn't solve anything. I know that scenario well. Usually crops up when one is trying to decide whether to open the next bottle or not. I mean, we've all met young, go-getting, useful people like this,
Yeah, he is quite likeable now that you say it, I guess.
Mm-hmm. And, he pulls out an umbrella. You take this, sir. I'll take her.
What's the point of the umbrella at this point? I would have thought the rain would help to maybe wash some of the crap off them.
Oh, yeah, but, he's a junior officer. He's got the general there. And then, what about your friend? Let's take her too. And he says, I'll take her. Only literally, ma'am. The woman let out a piercing shriek. Does she do that a lot? Yes, and watch her head when you pick her up. Near busted my nose. And finally it ends with, in the ensuing peace, he was demoted and stripped of several medals. He left later that year and the culture didn't seem displeased with how he'd done. So there's that little vignette. And now, before we wrap up the chapter, let's talk about whiskey.
Whiskey. We haven't done this for a while.
So what we have here is a Tamdhu 12-year-old, or Tamthu possibly. I'm sure the Scots will send us notes about pronunciation again. And it's a Speyside, which is one of the great whiskey-producing regions of Scotland. This one's been aged in sherry casks, which is definitely coming through. We're drinking this in our new Japanese whiskey glasses, which are very nice. Thank you to the Tokyo Bureau for sending those through. Sheridan, what are your thoughts?
I need another sip. Sorry.
Okay, that's fine. I mean, the sherry flavours are definitely there, as you'd hope if they've bothered to age it in sherry casks. And 12-year-old is...
Is that young?
That's young, yeah. It's still a bit raw.
I was going to say it kind of tastes young, but I don't really know why.
It's also got a very distinctive Speyside flavour, which...
What's that flavour?
This basically tastes like this. It's not entirely to my liking, but it's definitely legitimate what Speyside whiskies are meant to taste like.
There's a strong burn.
Yeah, I mean...
For a while.
Yeah, the word whiskey literally comes from, water of life, but there's a connotation of fire water, yeah.
Like it stays in the throat for a while.
Yeah.
And, it's quite warm here today, so I'm feeling like I'm already a bit hot.
Yeah. It's setting fire to you, Sheridan, bringing you life.
I feel like you really want to drink whiskey when you're cold.
Or you actually don't, because it opens up your capillaries and you die of hypothermia really quickly.
I mean cold and you got a ski jacket on.
Oh, yeah, sure. Okay. All right.
Or a puffy vest or something. I don't know.
Yep. Anyway, so it's... As a 12-year-old, it's a bit raw. We have actually got a little... Sheridan bought me a little gift set of Tamdhu whiskies, and there is an 18-year-old in the box, so in a later episode we can compare.
I realised I probably... Because Dan Murphy's, who does not sponsor this podcast, but, we'd be open.
That's where a third of all liquor bought in Australia comes from, a Dan Murphy's store.
It was just at the counter. They got me with the impulse buy. It was $40.
That's what it was there for.
I should have just bought a $40 bottle of whiskey. Is that possible, or would that be crap?
That would be a pretty grim bottle of whiskey.
Okay, so this was better?
It would be a lot more whiskey for your dollar.
Yeah. So this was a better choice?
I mean, by volume, if you'd paid for an $80 bottle, then you probably could have gotten something interesting. And we would have had a whole bottle of it. But for the purposes of talking about it in the podcast, this is quite good. I paid quite a lot of money for a selection of Australian whiskies that I wanted to talk about in this podcast, but they were only 15 millilitres in each of the bottles. But you just
drank them all.
Yeah, well, it's because they were only 15 millilitres.
No, but you just...
It would have been impossible to share them.
We could have had
so
a sip each.
Yeah, but we wouldn't... No, it just wouldn't have worked. Trust me, I tried. I even saved some over for the podcast, and I was like, no, they're just too small.
Wow.
Yeah.
This was acceptable level.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay, so what have you taken from this chapter, which is kind of meaningless in the narrative thread, quite useful in the storytelling?
It's not meaningless in the narrative thread because you learn about the chair.
But the chair has already been spoken of before.
Yeah, but you learn more about the chair. The chair's clearly like a character.
What do you think you've learned about the chair?
Well, just, like obviously someone was tied to a chair. It's all, the chair's a big deal.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I mean, I don't feel that's... The chair being a big deal has definitely been... I mean, the fact that it's been mentioned again, it's definitely building up.
It's building up to the chair.
Yeah. Yeah, and the Staber end as well. As,
I feel like that was more maybe something you were into.
Sure. Okay. Anything else you took from this chapter, though?
No, not really.
There were no ships at all.
The Staber end.
Oh, okay, but no culture ships.
That's true, yes.
In fact, no drones either.
No, actually, it was very low tech.
I mean, it was almost... It felt a bit like an early Tarantino film, although I would note that Banks wrote this long before Tarantino films existed. In that it was a single act play, basically in a single setting. There's a little bit of the interior and the exterior of the... but if you were shooting this, you could almost get away with just having the one set.
Yes.
There
was literally only one set.
Well, there's a little bit of the exterior walking around the island and things, but you did that on green screen. Yeah. Okay. I did feel that it set the scene quite heavily for a sense of what Zakalwe's day-to-day existence as a culture agent had been like.
That's true. You're right, yeah.
Whereas, because a lot of the other bits we've had so far have been things going exceptionally wrong.
Yeah.
The great screw-ups. Whereas this was things basically going right. And also an actual sense of Zakalwe being a talented general.
Yeah.
Because before that, we've just got kind of his word for it.
Yeah.
In amongst stuff-ups and failures. So... That's I thought that he was useful in terms of character development, and also the fact that he's this jaded smartass about these things even when he's in the middle of a crisis.
Yeah.
Cool. Anything else you want to talk about in this chapter?
And I meant to give my favourite character.
Oh, okay. Sheridan, tell us your favourite character.
Difficult because there's not many.
No.
I'll give the dude that comes in at the end.
The dude, his name you can't remember.
Yep.
Rog Tambar.
Yep, Rob Tambar.
Okay. Did you feel that way about him before we revisited the chapter here?
No, but I hadn't thought about the answer to the question.
Okay. Right. Okay, well, I hope all our audience are having a good new year. On our social media, I'll chuck up an infographic because we've actually had quite explosive growth in the last year, Sheridan.
Wow.
We've got heaps more listeners than we used to have. So, but although most of them are going back through the back catalogue, but that's the nature of a podcast like this, is the back catalogue is still worth listening to. And I know there's a bunch of people who are waiting till we finish the book before they start listening to the podcast. So, welcome aboard when you finally get here, folks. Oh, sorry, for the purpose of completeness, it is the 2nd of January, 2024. I'm still getting confused about what year I'm in. I don't think I'm alone in that. Okay, folks, thank you so much for listening, and we will be back in however long it takes Sheridan to read the next chapter.
Well, probably pretty quick because I
You've
already
listened
read
to it. Oh, it could be turns around tomorrow night.
It's quite possible, actually.
Okay, all right. We'll be back as soon as practicable. Thank you, folks. Goodbye.
Bye.